you can't reject the individual. And if you just throw the individual away onto the street, is that really accomplishing anything?
Welcome to Beyond the Threshold, a podcast where we discuss the various ways housing, mental health, and substance use disorders collide. I'm Ian Stratton, a program manager at Thresholds Homes and Supports in Kitchener. Today, I'm really excited to have on our show Joe Mancini, the founder of the Working Center, a nonprofit social enterprise based in Kitchener that's been a fixture in the region of Waterloo housing, employment, and social justice community since 1982. Hi, Joe. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Hello, Ian. Nice to be here.
Again, thank you for making the time to be here. So we'll just get right into it. So can you tell us about the Working Center and what makes it unique?
Yeah, thanks for that nice introduction. Working Center is unique these days, I think, because it is an infrastructure to respond. It's an infrastructure to respond to kind of real issues that are on the ground. For example, homelessness. It's pretty amazing that we could establish 3 emergency shelters, in the middle of the pandemic, and at the same time distribute 700 meals a day out of a commercial kitchen in a model we weren't using before the pandemic. But underneath all that, we were also renovating a building on Queen Street to create 21 units. And so there's a lot of work. The regular work goes on, but there's this kind of unique culture of action, but also people, we put our resources into people that move things around. We don't have a lot of we don't have HR resources or fundraisers or development officers. We have people on the ground moving things around. And I think that makes us really unique. But that's kind of my perspective. I think there's another aspect, which is this that the level of hospitality flows through the organization. So what does hospitality mean? It's how, when someone walks in our door, how open are we? Have we eliminated as many barriers as possible given the circumstances to create a friendly environment? And so that's a constant challenge. Mm-hmm. And then there's one other thing that makes us unique, in that the Working Center is a very equal salary structure. Okay. People who start at the Working Center can make the wage of the director in 10 years. Wow. But that just means the director's wage isn't very much. But that's not really the point. The point is that we've created a structure of equality. Mm-hmm. And then I think that helps the infrastructure on the ground to do the work that needs to be done.
Okay. So, what can you tell me about the, I guess you mentioned the culture and and being able to, someone that's been with the company for 10 years making the same amount as a director.
Not exactly the same amount, but 2 or 3% close.
Okay. Yeah. So how do you balance those things in the current market between your cultural values, I guess, and those pieces around?
We have had to increase our grid, meaning increase the director's wage to as things have changed. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, I think that allows us to adapt to the local market, mm-hmm. To the present day market. We have people who, maybe at Thresholds too, we have people who want to work for the Working Center. Mm-hmm. And it just, and when you have such a wide variety of people,
Mhm.
who were kind of seeing if they want to be part of our culture. They learn about our culture. We find, surprising people who come in and make really great contributions, um, and add to the culture.
Okay.
So I don't know. We found our adaptability has been pretty high.
Mhm. Okay. And so, I guess maybe taking a bit of a step back, what inspired you to start the Working Center?
Well, I don't think it's not. I don't really think it was inspired or anything. We were responding to unemployment and poverty in 1982. Very real thing. There wasn't, in the same way that thresholds in those same years responded to by creating housing
Mhm.
for people with mental health issues. The Working Center, was looking around. Like, there isn't a resource center for people who are looking for work that isn't controlled by the government. That isn't the Canada Employment Center. And it didn't take much. I'll tell you, it didn't take much to put a sign on the door and people coming in looking for support.
Mhm.
So like it really was a model of how do you support people. But then of course, as soon as that happened, then you start realizing that there's a percentage of that group looking for work. They can barely afford a meal each day. Um, and so then that's how, St. John's Kitchen evolved. And then you put those two things together and then you start doing this and that. But over time, it's not so much that you're inspired as much as you do the work on the ground, you respond to things happening. 40 years goes by and there's 35 projects and you just keep trying to figure them out.
Okay. In terms of those projects, which one would you say that you are the most proud about?
Oh my gosh. It's to me that would be an impossible question to
Mhm.
answer. I love the employment work. When I walk into the Employment Resource Center and I see that work going on, it's just so important for people. When I walk into some of our apartments and see that we've created apartments, I love that. Walk into St. John's Kitchen, I love that.
Mhm.
On St. John's Kitchen, nice story in that context. We started at St. John's Anglican Church, and now, then we moved on to buy our own building, renovate it with the people of St. John's Kitchen doing the renovations um, in the 2000s. And now we're going to recreate that building, 97 Victoria. And we've moved St. John's Kitchen back to the church for a year. The church is letting us come back. So, you just as much sense of pride to be back there and to
Mhm.
remember where we started from. So yeah, I think it, it's the I guess the what is so neat about the culture of the Working Center, or what inspires pride, is the commitment of the people doing the work every day, and seeing that work getting done, and I'm talking about really hard work under really trying circumstances all the time.
Yeah, in terms of, I guess, what's been happening within the region of Waterloo writ large, how do you stay current, like based on your ideals, um, while still keeping those at kind of the forefront of your work?
Yeah, yeah, no question. As I was just saying, the when we purchased 97 Victoria in 2005, we could use the patrons of St. John's Kitchen to do the construction work. They were very much part of the like our culture. Our culture in that year, we renovated 43 Queen, 66 Queen, 58 Queen, and and then 97 Victoria. And we had this ability to attract workers off out of who were no longer in the labor market, who wanted to contribute. people who are using St. John's Kitchen for a meal each day. And that was a pretty neat kind of thing. That's two things have happened. The even the construction industry is professionalized and safetyized beyond recognition, even in those 15 years. But at the same time, individuals who use St. John's Kitchen, their lives are, have been devastated. And that's because, for example, those individuals I might have talked about in 2005, who they may have had an addiction, but it might have been alcohol, and they could still work during the day. They could still manage, even with that alcohol addiction. Crystal meth and fentanyl as drug addictions really mess up people's ability to function in society. And we see it. And we have to understand that the majority of people who use St. John's Kitchen right now are in the middle of the opioid or crystal meth addiction. And so their lives are very messed up. And, we've had to adapt because that's, that those former circumstances just aren't there. The former circumstances that were, for sure the very core of our concept of involving people in the work that needs to be done is not, is less possible. But I feel we've adapted and we're doing, it's different kind of work, but the work continues.
Yeah, give it I know with what's happening in terms of the opioid and crystal meth, I would say epidemic within not just our community, but I would say Canada and North America, you would say in many ways. How has the working center, you're speaking around adaptation, how has the working center kind of adapted to support those people that are using those substances?
Yeah, that's a really big question. And so it takes up, at least 50% of the working center's work right now. So that's a giant long. How long of an answer do you want on that? Because it starts with, that story starts for us November 11, 2019. The summer before that, we had said to the region, we can count 200 people outside, 225 people outside. They're living, they're camping, they're finding places to live, but they don't have a solid address. Winter's coming, and we didn't understand it as well at that point. This was 2019, but it turns out almost all of them were in the midst of drug addiction. But that's not fair because we had seen that at St. John's Kitchen. St. John's Kitchen between 2016, 17, especially 2017 to 18, it had turned upside down with the level of drug use in the washrooms and the circumstances and overdoses. And there's a point where there is an overdose every, seemingly. And we had the minister there, for some health minister there, and there's an overdose right there. I mean, it would seem like every day there is an overdose. It was just, so we were feeling that pressure. By 2019, we were trying to do more and more, trying to figure it out. And that's when we opened a warming shelter at St. Mary's Church. And that kind of catapulted us into basically saying we're going to do more shelter. So up to then, Working Center had never done emergency shelter.
Okay.
So, we had apartments. We had apartments designed for people that were most chronically homeless, but we weren't doing emergency shelter per se. We felt a obligation to possibly use St. John's Kitchen at night as a shelter, and we talked about that very, very seriously. It was never the best option, but but the reality of so many people not having a place to sleep in the winter, out of the colds were no longer in the game, out of the colds having closed as much because of the growing drug problem and how difficult it was for volunteers to manage that.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are to 19, and then the pandemic hit, and a little more money was available, but also the region, like other regions, started figuring out they had to create more shelter spaces. And so that's where we've added 230 beds now.
Yeah.
So from that St. Mary's thing. And those 230 beds, that pretty well doubles what was formerly the shelter system.
Mm-hmm.
2019, we would say there are 250 shelter spaces in Waterloo region. Now we say that we're holding 230 shelter spaces that are all different from the former ones.
Yeah.
So that effectively doubled the system, and so that's been a very harsh adaptation on our part, because that's figuring these are all three of the shelters are 24/7, meaning, and that means people get fed 24/7.
Yep.
Okay, so you have to have meals, you have to have staffing. One is a big congregate kind of shelter place.
Mm-hmm.
One is the 50 cabins. The other is a dorm style place with 80 people. There are three different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
So then the fact is, drugs are a big part of all three places. Just getting back to your original question, and we've had to adapt. And the same as at St. John's Kitchen. And I could describe in more detail how we've adapted if you want.
Well, yeah, I guess that there's that really interesting part between adaptation, especially when it comes to the intersection between mental health, housing, and substance use, that the average person doesn't have a real good understanding of how those three intertwine. And I would be curious to hear how you've kind of adapted, because oftentimes people require a different approach depending on who they are, right? So yeah, if you could speak a little bit more on that, that would be great.
Yeah. One of the main adaptations has been these public health youth centers. So the ability to allow people, not in all our spaces, but in a couple of them, for people to use drugs, and then it's not that we're not part of that. It's not like a safe injection site or anything. It's just these are federally not funded. There's no money involved, but they're federally authorized sites. So you have to have public health agreement on them, and have to go through the rules. So once those are in place, though, what it means, they drastically cut down on people's people's what do you call that? Like their need to use drugs wherever and whenever.
Yeah.
And by reducing the tension, so that people feel like they can, when they have access to the drugs, or when they're going into a withdrawal and they need a drug, they can deal with that. So a lot of the mental health, a lot of the anger, a lot of the screaming and yelling, a lot of the violence, is directly related to how the individual is dealing with their drugs. And it only makes sense that would be true, whether they're coming off withdrawal or they're in the middle of having too much of it. And you can't reject the individual. And if you just throw the individual away onto the street, is that really accomplishing anything?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really been the tolerance, and the tolerance is so high in our spaces. Um, you know, like we have very few people who are absolutely rejected and with a non-contact order.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't resolve the issues with no contact orders. Sometimes we do, but we try to resolve the issue by building a relationship, by slowly working with the individual, trying to pleading for reason and connection, and using outreach workers to take the person to a dentist's appointment,
Mm-hmm.
or taking them to deal with their law stuff or their legal stuff. A little bit helping for finding housing for sure, but that's that's such a dead end. And again, that's part of the frustration that individuals feel.
For sure.
Mental health is as much about people's frustrations against the system that they feel they're hitting their head against,
Mm-hmm.
or when they feel that they've been left out, when they feel that their family has left them out, they feel that their family's let them down, they feel they've let down their family.
Mm-hmm.
These are just such. So when you get to the point of homeless, living in a tent, um, the level of survivability on the part of the individual is pretty high, but that survivability comes at a cost of all kinds of emotions
Mm-hmm.
that they have to hide and keep quiet, and other stuff comes out, and it's really recognizing that process.
Yeah. So
And
kind of meeting them where they're at,
yeah,
and then kind of advocating the way that they would like to be advocated for.
it really is, and it takes our outreach workers are just they're not only trained in that, they've trained us in that.
Mm-hmm.
Our outreach workers go way beyond what any middle class person would think is a reasonable. A school would never tolerate that.
Mm-hmm.
That the kind of actions that we work with individuals on, and so and most shelters don't either. In fact, they don't. Like we basically have the people who get kicked out of all the other shelters as
Okay.
well.
Yeah. So then, kind of speaking about tolerance, and then in some cases lack thereof, and then advocacy as a response. What about communities that aren't as open to supporting those at risk or currently experiencing homelessness? How do you go about working with those communities?
Yeah. So we have, in a sense, we have 4 shelters.
Hmm.
3, but then St. John's Kitchen. So St. John's Kitchen has always been a place, whether it was at St. John's Church, 97 Victoria, now back at St. John's Church. When you gather 230, 300 people a day, that's a big number of people.
Mm-hmm.
And if many of them are dealing with drug issues, that's an issue. So anyways, that's why I would include St. John's Kitchen in this. And so each shelter or space has a different, has a real different context. The Herb Street shelter is pretty far away from anybody, although ironically, there's 3 or 4 houses right beside the shelter.
Okay.
Up at Herb Street. And they've had a couple issues for sure. The one fella, has been vigilant initially because he thought it was going to be really bad. He still thinks that it's going to be really bad. He's still vigilant. But I think I think he's at least seen that we respond really, I won't say effectively, but we respond as best we can, as often as, as soon as there's an issue. So our model is always to respond as best we can. directly to go out and deal with things. So,
Mhm.
so anyways, Herb Street, things have gone pretty good out there on the whole. Over on University Avenue, right in the middle of, it's right at um, Phillip and University, which is
Mhm.
right, the core of kind of University District there. It's done remarkably well. We used to have more complaints from some of the businesses, but the businesses would send us video, and they're not our people. They,
Yeah.
there's a whole student craziness going on around there, and a student desperateness, I would say.
Okay.
Like students with their own mental health issues, and so I think people have seen that the people at UA, as we call it, they don't really tend to mix with the university crowd. They
Okay.
don't want to hang around there. They don't want to hang around with that group so much. So anyways, it's been uh, there have been kind of neighbors who do have their cars broken into.
Mhm.
That is a reality, but it's 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 not it's it's I could be people from UA, but it could be other people too.
Yeah.
Given what I've seen from the videos of other places,
Mhm.
very, very well dressed individuals, breaking into buildings, So there's people who are desperate for, why are people desperate for money? I don't think it's to pay the rent.
Yeah.
Individuals desperate for money, they're probably trying to deal with their drug debt
Mhm.
or to get access to the drug. So anyways, but we do have an issue on King Street, the
Okay.
King Street shelter. I think we've done a lot to ameliorate it. In fact, it's kind of a weird thing. The region gave us an outreach worker. The outreach worker was on the street when we first opened, November, December, this January 2022, and into 2023. And the worker was getting zero calls. There
Interesting.
wasn't stuff on, and it was kind of the winter. But things kind of exploded in April, May, June.
Okay.
There were a lot of issues. There were a lot of our people from the shelter who were a couple individuals kind of scoping the neighborhood, looking for
Mhm.
things to steal.
Okay.
But those individuals are identified.
Yeah.
Those were individuals who were removed from the shelter. There's only a
Mhm.
couple. And then, we have the neighborhood complaining, one woman complaining um, about, police
Mhm.
and emergency vehicles showing up at the shelter.
For sure.
Well, that's because there's a crisis. Well, how many? There are 24 overdoses in Waterloo Region on the weekend.
Mhm.
Um, Most of our overdoses actually at the shelter are from people outside who are not allowed into the shelter because we're full.
Okay.
And in like our people using our proper use site aren't really having overdoses. It's the people who are left outside. So, anyways, the main thing is that we're trying our best. We're now set up for King Street. We have an advisory committee.
Mhm.
Um, First meeting, it's a year. Admittedly, it's late,
Yeah.
but a year later, we're setting it up. Many reasons why it took so long, but um, um, the other thing was that this place was supposed to be temporary, only for a year,
Yeah.
and who knows how long it's going to be there. The neighbors probably want neighbors, if they were to vote, they'd have it gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
But we have about 100. We can count 150 to 200 people are still outside.
Mhm. Now, would you say in terms of like the neighbors, community members, some larger communities. Would you say, I guess, what would you say in terms of why you see there being such opposition to people that are living in crisis being part of the neighborhood?
That's a really good question. It's really like I take exception to people complaining that there's an emergency vehicle waking them up at night.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sure, maybe they are being woken up at night. Maybe the sirens are blaring. I can't imagine they are, but if they
Mm-hmm.
are, I think it's more about the lights. Anyways, but it's a real mix.
Okay.
And that's what's weird. Like you have a ton of people in the neighborhoods who want that to be there, but you have three or four people who, I was in one of these meetings and a woman said, there was someone having an overdose on my front door or my front property, and what was I supposed to do? And making it, and basically she said she shut the door and and closed the drapes, kind of thing.
Oh, geez.
And to me, I mean, why wouldn't you just try and help the person? Like, is it
Yeah.
really, would it? So there's some parts of our society, and I don't think I don't think it's new. I think it's always been there, but on some levels, perhaps it's worse
Mm-hmm.
that people forget, what's the meaning of the Good Samaritan?
Okay.
And, I'd be embarrassed to say that in public,
Yeah.
that, someone is having an overdose on my front lawn and I close the door and it
Went
went
about your day.
inside. Doesn't make sense. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, call 911 or go outside and help the person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think maybe part of it is maybe a lack of
Oh,
engagement.
yeah. Can I tell
Um,
a kind of a good story that's I think
Definitely.
is a beautiful story for thresholds? Um, we also got in trouble because this one woman who was having clearly a manic episode,
Mm-hmm.
and she was determined to get into a rehabilitation program,
Okay.
and she was going door to door to raise money for that. She was also manic.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, well, what is the harm of someone going door to door asking for money because she wants to get into a rehab program?
Yeah.
No, you could say all kinds of things. Well, she's just going door to door to get money to do drugs. Or you could say, you could say that, or you could just engage the woman and, say, well, I don't have money today, or I do want to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And what do like, but why did the neighborhood call that a problem?
Yeah.
Like, that's, oh, well, you brought, like the working center brought these people to our neighborhood.
Mhm.
Well, that could be a gift too.
Yeah. Maybe it's an opportunity.
Yeah. No, that's how I look at things.
Mm-hmm.
But then, the rest of the world often doesn't.
Yeah, and
So I get in trouble.
it's an unfortunate reality that we have this situation, and as you say, it's been going on for a long time, where we're told to be good human beings and to share, but at the same time we also get this messaging that individuals that are in crisis, that are homeless or living with substance use and mental health, are something to stay away from, and they're
Yeah.
kind of the ones that need the most help,
Yeah.
most support.
Most love.
Mm-hmm. Um,
Uh,
so
can I tell
speaking,
you one other? Got
sure.
time for one other funny story? Um, in the same meeting, um, the one very rational man said, "Well, why don't we establish patrols in the middle of the night through the neighborhood?"
Okay.
And I said, "Well, it's a great idea. I know that would be expensive, so how about if the working center provided a person, could the neighborhood provide a person? Do it. So then we could share the work.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a nice volunteer thing.
Yeah.
People got mad at me, like no, that's not what we're saying. You do that. You do the work. But in the old days, no, this would be an old days thing. In the old days, I mean, that was called neighborhood watch or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like you would involve the neighborhood is involved. But
Yeah.
this group was like, no, that's your problem. I don't know. That made me think, oh well, okay, if it's my problem, then we'll just go with my speed to deal with it.
Yeah. So we're just coming close to our time.
Oh well.
Is there anything you would like to promote or talk about really quick before we have to close out?
Yeah. Just I'm gonna the St. John, the idea of St. John's Kitchen, I think, is the recreation 97 Victoria,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a neat thing to talk about because it is a kind of mental health facility that we're developing. This property, we're going to create 2 floors. They're going to be there's kind of a mix, kind of more like dorm units, 44 units. 44 bedrooms,
Okay.
small bedrooms. We expect to be staffed,
Mm-hmm.
and 24/7 we'll be providing meals. So we're creating, it's kind of like the best of University Avenue and the Herbs Road.
Mm-hmm.
Only 44 people, 22 people per floor. And but then down below, there's going to on the main floor where St. John's Kitchen is, where the showers and laundry and washrooms for the wider community are. There's also going to be a much bigger medical counseling kind of center
Okay.
space.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be a real addition to the kind of work we're all doing to have that available.
Well, and that will provide the wraparound supports that I think a lot of people need in order to be successful.
No question about it.
So that is about all the time we have.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been really great having the chance to hear about the great work your organization is doing in the community. I also really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights and thoughts on how to address housing, mental health, and substance use.
I was excited when you asked. Obviously, we've worked with Thresholds, the Working Center and Thresholds. We've kind of grown up together over these 40 years. And so thanks for asking me to be on it.
Thank you so much, Joe. And hopefully this will probably not be the last time we have you on here.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Take care. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.